So a couple of weeks ago, I did a video where I rewatched the 2011 NBA Finals and gave some updated opinions on that particular series just because it was something that happened before I was in the NBA YouTube landscape. I mean, frankly, I don't think NBA YouTube even existed back then, but I've wanted to revisit doing this because you guys responded very positively to the 2011 Finals video, and I decided to watch the 2002 Western Conference Finals between the Sacramento Kings and Los Angeles Lakers. Two reasons. First of all, the Kings and Lakers are just interesting teams to me in that year. And then also, of course, there is the Tim Donaghy potential rigging scandal that we will talk about, but I am going to save that conversation for more towards the end of the video. At the start, at least, I want to talk about these two teams. I'll start with the Lakers, and probably the thing that stood out to me the most while watching them is the lack of organization within the offense. I actually started watching the 1993 finals because that's the next one up that I'm going to do in these style of videos. And I was watching them, the triangle offense of the 90s Bulls, and there's a bunch of sets, there's a bunch of movement, there's a bunch of plays. The offense is simpler than modern offenses, but by no means was it just, yeah, give the ball to MJ. But when it comes to the 2002 Lakers, at least, it was give the ball to Shaq, give the ball to Kobe, it should work out. And I mean, it did for reasons maybe beyond just their capabilities, but they were dominant enough on the offensive end to get the job done. But what it ended up standing out to me is like just how truly bad the supporting cast around those two players was at that time, and generally was throughout their tenure. Like, Robert Horry and Rick Fox and Derek Fisher are the only players who I would say were anything resembling a good player on these teams. And even still, like, they were not ideally your third, fourth, and fifth best player, at least in the context of a modern NBA. But when you contrasted that to the Sacramento Kings, who are about as deep gets for this era of NBA history, it definitely surprised me. Like, just how the contrast existed between that team style versus just, yeah, give the ball to Kobe, give the ball to Shaq. And I think possibly, my main takeaway, I think, is if the Kings won this series and then eventually won the championship, because I presume them to be a better team than the 02 Nets, I think the direction of basketball would have changed pretty dramatically. Generally, teams don't really embrace certain play styles or ways of winning until it gets you all the way. And if it gets you all the way against Kobe and Shaq, who eventually would go on to three-peat but had previously won the last two titles, it's hard to imagine that depth wouldn't be highlighted as something more important than it was perceived at that time. We continued to have the dead ball era for a very long time, continued to have like ISO offense that was entirely dictated by guards for the most part. The other thing, Kobe's shot selection, dude, I recognize that it's the era. I recognize that that's just kind of the way that it went at this time with the NBA, because the dead ball era just means that like a lot of offense is just, we have a guy who can hit difficult shots more than your guy who hits difficult shots. And so many shots that Kobe took in this series would get you benched in the modern NBA. That's not an indictment on him as a player, because that's just the play style. That's just the context of this era. Like, that's not because he was out there just taking dumb shots. Everyone was taking dumb shots pretty persistently. For the Sacramento Kings, the player who stood out to me the most was Mike Bibby. Like, Chris Webber had overall better stats in that series. He also had a more notable impact on the defensive end of the floor. But in terms of who was actually getting the offense to go, it was Mike Bibby more often than not. His mid-range jumper was automatic for the entire series. He averaged 22 points, and I feel like probably 16 points per game of that was mid-range shots. Like, not even kidding. Chris Webber, I was shocked at how much the Lakers elected to let Chris Webber shoot from mid-range. Like, he was wide open with rhythm, with plenty of comfort, more often than not on those jumpers. I also love the playmaking thing with the bigs on this Sacramento Kings team. Vlade Divac only averaged like 2 assists for this series, but every single one of them was super impressive. And like, he always made quick decisions with the ball. There's still a little bit of clunkiness there. I'm not acting like he was this super smooth playmaking hub 100% of the time, but like between him and Weber, probably the best passing big man duo that existed in the NBA at that time, if I had to guess. They had Bobby Jackson off of the bench, who was a really good two-way player, won Sixth Man of the Year. The year following this one, he was second to race in 2002. Hedo Turkoglu stepped up big time in the series because, unfortunately, they were missing Peja Stojakovic. He played a little bit towards the tail end, but he was clearly not ready. He airballed a game-winning three-pointer, and I want to say game 6, like literally right at the very end of that game. But Hedo stepped up in his place. He wasn't good the first 2 games, but he averaged like 16 points for the rest of it. Jumper was really smooth, good decisions, good defense. Also made the Kings a really big team because Chris Webber at the 4 is like 6'10", Hedo at the 3 is 6'10", you got a 7-footer in Vlade. Mike Bibby's like 6'2", 6'1" if I had to guess, but then Doug Christie, who's a very good defensive player, I would wager he's got a longer wingspan than his height, and he's also like 6'5", 6'6". So like the Kings were a pretty big team. It made it harder for Shaq to operate in the paint. Not that he did have that much of an issue with it. But with that said, I think we can go ahead and get into the actual scandal of all of this, the rigging, as it were. If you are not aware, Tim Donaghy got arrested and prosecuted rigging games. He had a gambling addiction, and he was making predictions and changing the outcomes of different games. A lot of that was proven pretty directly, I believe, by the FBI. And in fact, I believe the FBI director or whoever was responsible for the investigation actually said they regretted involving the NBA as early as they did because it probably prevented more cases of rigged games being noticed. Like the NBA's reaction when they found out a ref was rigging games wasn't like, oh no, we need to persecute that guy to the fullest extent of the law. They were like, oh no, we're about to get persecuted to the fullest extent of the law because it's a more systemic thing. And then Tim wrote a book where he proclaimed, I think this came out in 2008, where he said that the 2002 conference finals between these two teams, game 6 in particular, was rigged. I watched the whole series, and again, for those of you who ask, literally look up Kings-Lakers 2002 Western Conference Finals Game 1, Game 2. They're all on YouTube. I'm telling you, they're all on YouTube. Just look it up. But I paid extra close attention to Game 6 because that is the controversial one. And I gotta be honest, I didn't really see it that much. There is one call that was made against the Kings, or I guess not against the Kings, that I would say was egregious. And that is when Kobe just elbows the fuck out of Mike Bibby on an inbound play where he was going to get the ball to shoot some free throws. Now, if that was called what it should have been, the Kings would have gotten 2 free throws, and I believe they were down 1. So if Mike Bibby sinks both of them, they take a 1-point lead. There's still like 20-ish seconds left in the game, so the Lakers would have had a chance to match that. So who's to say if that actually would have determined the result of the game? However, like when you watch the replay of it, there is a ref looking right at Kobe as he elbows Mike Bibby in the face. So like that shit was egregious. It was a terrible call. Everything else was permissible. Now, the thing with fouls is certain. They're not like, there's not an objective, is that a foul? Is that not a foul? Other than like when there's a phantom foul where there's literally not contact and you can see on the replay that there's not contact. In that case, could you argue that the Kings were getting called for things as fouls that the Lakers weren't? Maybe a 10% switch? Maybe you could argue that. But something that I would say, and I hope this does not get misconstrued, because I think a big reason that people just run away with the argument that this game is like severely rigged is A, Tim Donaghy saying that it was. By the way, he didn't ref that game. He was just saying like they had a guy there that he knows to be the specialist in rigging or whatever, which I think has been unproven. And it's also a dude who's a pathological liar. So I don't necessarily fully trust his take there. But there's Tim Donaghy saying it, and then there's the free throw disparity. I'll be real, dude. The free throw disparity was not a matter of terrible officiating. It was a matter of the Lakers being far more paint-oriented as a team. Shaq shot a lot of those free throws. Kobe was driving inside and getting hacked a good bit. Like, there were a couple that are debatable, but there was only one call against the Kings that I would say was outright bullshit. And in fact, I would say the officiating in the first half leaned Sacramento's way. And I think if there was some like, yeah, the NBA is rigging this game conspiracy, I really don't think they would have officiated the entirety of the game the way that they did, because they very easily could have been calling ticky-tack fouls towards the start or letting the Lakers get away with fouls towards the start, but that just did not happen. The Kings shot more free throws in the first half of that game than the Lakers did. But the other thing, the Sacramento Kings were terrible at the free throw line. And like, my thing is, yes, even if the Lakers had a little bit of pull with the refs, if they were trying to massage the result towards what they actually want, if that is even provably the case, which I don't think it is, but even if we're accepting that reality, there still is some onus on the team to overcome that barrier. Like, I'm telling you, the way that the refs officiated this game is not the reason the Kings lost this game. They lost this game because they were fucking awful on their free throws. And they were also fucking awful on their free throws in Game 7. Okay, so for the game at large, the Kings shot 18 for 25 from the free throw line, which is 72%. It's actually not that bad. While the Lakers shot 34 of 40, which is 85%. So a lot of it was just the teams that's getting the free throws are hitting more of the free throws. I mean, 25 to 34. It's a 9 free throw difference, but the Lakers end up, or no, it's 40 attempts rather. I did that math wrong. So it's a 15 free throw difference in terms of attempts, but the Lakers made damn near double the amount of free throws that the Kings did. Maybe Game 7 is the more egregious one and I'm just misremembering. But there was that factor in it. It's also the game was super, super close at the end, and the Kings missed a lot of shots that they could have made that would have changed the result. There was a play towards the end where Vlade had a wide open Chris Webber under the basket and he missed him. And then he also, I think, missed both of his free throws, something like that. But I'll highlight all of the individual calls that I made note of watching the game. Kings have a 5-point lead and took 5 more free throws. I don't know where the recording got cut off, but I was citing some of the different fouls throughout the game. There was a BS foul on Scott Pollard against Shaq where there was not really any contact on the hook. And Pollard did end up fouling out on that call, so that's not great. Webber flopped on a Shaq post-up, and Shaq got called for an offensive foul. Like, to me, it was pretty clearly a flop, so that's a bad call against the Lakers. Also, Shaq was crazy from the free throw line in Game 6 and Game 7. This is kind of the only example of him in his whole I hit him when they count bullshit. He went 13 for 17 from the free throw line in this game. Like, he was hitting a 77% is really high, and one for Divac where it didn't even really look like Horry gave him any contact, so that's another bad call against the Lakers. Webber is called for an offensive foul that was kind of bullshit, but he didn't get a call earlier that could have very easily been an offensive foul, so it was kind of a makeup. This one was just weird and unfortunate, I would say, because again, I'm like, if you are trying to call everything that you can, then you would call this immediately. Chris Webber just grabbed Robert Horry's wrist, plain as day, in front of the ref. As a result, he fell down and dropped the ball. But then, after Robert Horry jumped after the ball, Vlade Divac fell on him, and that was called a loose ball foul. That caused Divac to foul out. The foul should have been on Webber, and no one would have fouled out. So the fact that both Divac and Pollard subbed out meant that Lawrence Funderburk, who I've never heard of a day in my life, had to sub into the game and close. So, like, should have been a call against Weber instead of Divac, but there was a foul there. And again, if you're trying to call every little thing the very obvious thing that is a foul, you would think they would call that. Yeah, I wrote in here, like, if they were going to bend everything against Sacramento, I don't know why they wouldn't get Weber for that. Kobe drives on Christie, clean contest by him and a clean block by Weber, but a foul is called. So yeah, that one's not very good. I can understand how the ref thought it was a foul based on the angle. Kobe does have that factor in his game where he just kind of flails around after he shoots. Fisher fouls Bibby on a drive before the shot, but they don't call it until he takes the shot. So again, like, that allowed the continuation. That turned it from a stop of possession to free throw. So that one was not good. Hito fouls Fox on a post up, and it was a legit call. Yeah, Kobe elbows Bibby in the inbound, no call. That's the only egregious one. And yeah, please go back and watch that game. Please actually have watched that game if you're going to comment, because I watched it years ago and I was like, I don't really see what the big deal is. And this time around, I was like, I'm going to pay really close attention to every whistle. And I was like, this is really not that crazy. This is really not that bad. I don't get where all the anger comes from. I think it's just the Lakers, and Tim Donaghy said it. Like, if he said this shit about a different franchise, I really don't think that people would stick to it as just gospel. I really don't think that's gospel at all. And the other thing, like, as I mentioned with, like, okay, you're at a disadvantage, that sucks. You got to work around it if you're truly a great team. Well, Game 7, the officiating was fine. Game 7, there was not an agenda. Game 7, was on the Sacramento Kings home floor as well, and they very easily could have won this game. It went into overtime. They just kept fucking it up. And as for the Game 7 free throws, total game, where are we? 33 free throws for the Lakers, and they hit 27 of them, 82%. For the Kings, they shot 30 free throws, so the Lakers only got 3 more, but they made 16, which is 53%. Quite literally, the Sacramento Kings could have made 1 during regulation before overtime, and they would have won the game. 1 of the multitude of free throws that they brick. I'm sorry, that needs to be a factor in this conversation. The Game 7 that happens after is still relevant, and the Sacramento Kings very easily could have won that Game 7. They just didn't show up. They truly did not come to play. Like, Mike Bibby was cool. Chris Webber had 11 assists. I didn't realize he had 11 assists in Game 7. God damn. Vlade Divac, 5 for 10 from the free throw line. Hito went 1 for 4. Bibby and Webber, Bibby hit 6 of 8, which is cool, but Weber split his pair. Yeah, dude, they just missed so many free throws in Game 7, and to me, that is a far bigger factor in them losing this game than the officiating at the second half of Game 6. I really don't think it was that bad. The Kings literally got more free throws in the first half. There were so many opportunities to grift fouls that, like, again, if you are trying to rig, like, I think if the refs were trying to rig Game 6, they did an incredible job of being subtle about it, as far as I'm concerned. I'm also not one to believe games are rigged. I'm also not one to just blindly hate on the Lakers and assume that they just did the most devilish thing possible every time. I don't buy the narrative that Game 6 was just flagrantly rigged by the league. You can maybe make a case that Bibby call would have won the series. That's real. One call doesn't really spell super rigged to me. That, to me, spells it was a bad call, and that sucks. But yeah, that's my take. I'm sorry if you're a Sacramento Kings fan and I hurt your feelings on this one. I really loved watching that team play, and I truly think they are one of the best non-championship teams ever. Loved their play style, super ahead of their time, like the big-to-big passing stuff, how much Weber shot mid-range shots. Obviously, those would be threes today, but still, there's a lot of good stuff there. The Kings were a very good team that had a chance to be a championship team, but even if you want to say the refs gave the Lakers some favor, the Kings didn't give themselves any favor in that game 7 by shooting 50% from the line. And I think that is a more significant factor in them losing the series than a bad inbound call. That's just me, though. Let me know what you think. I hope this didn't end up coming off too controversial. I was fully prepared to say that game was rigged if the evidence suggested as much, but I really don't think it did. I really don't. I would implore you to go watch the second half of that game. There's some stuff that you could say wouldn't be called, but guess what? That's in every NBA game that's ever been played. There is always room for interpretation on that front, and I don't really think this was some crazy, egregious thing by the NBA by any means. But yeah, that is it. Thank you so much for watching. I am going to tackle the 1993 finals next. Not a lot of time left because the season is about to start. So I'll hopefully be able to get that series in before the season starts. Won't be doing that during the regular season because we're going to be watching the actual basketball. Probably going to be watching basketball more this year than I ever have before because I'm going to be more deliberate about my process. But yeah, that's some inside baseball for you. Bye.